It was a bright afternoon when a young black woman named Lena drove down Main Street, heading toward the courthouse. She was dressed neatly in a light blouse and skirt, her hair tied back, and a folder of legal papers sitting on the seat beside her. Her father, a well-known federal judge, had asked her to drop off a few documents before an important meeting. She had done this kind of errand many times before, but today she was running a little late. As she slowed at a red light, she noticed a police cruiser parked at the corner. The officer inside was watching cars pass, his arm resting lazily on the window. When the light turned green, Lena continued forward, not thinking much of it. But within moments, flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Her heart skipped a beat. She checked her speed, well within the limit. Still, she eased to the side of the road. The officer stepped out of his car and walked over, his boots heavy on the pavement. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. Lena rolled her window down halfway. The officer leaned in. His tone was sharp. "You know why I stopped you?" She kept her voice calm. "I'm not sure, officer." "Was I speeding?" "You were going too fast through that intersection," he said quickly, as if rehearsed. "License and registration." Lena reached for her purse slowly. She'd learned over the years to move carefully around officers. Her hands were visible the whole time. "I believe I was going 30, she said softly. "That's the limit here," he smirked. "You can argue that in court." The way he said it made her stomach twist. She handed him her ID and registration. He glanced at the documents but didn't return to his car. Instead, he lingered. His tone grew colder. "Where are you headed, dressed up like that?" "To the courthouse," Lena said. "I have to deliver some documents." The officer gave a short laugh. "The courthouse, huh? What kind of documents?" "They're legal files," she answered. "For my father," he tilted his head. "Your father's a lawyer?" She hesitated a second, unsure how much to say. "Something like that." He leaned closer, resting his hands on the window edge. "I don't like when people give vague answers," he said, his voice low. "Step out of the car for me." Lena blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" "Step out," he repeated louder this time. A few people across the street paused, watching. She felt a lump form in her throat, but did as he said. The warm air hit her face as she stepped onto the curb. The officer walked around her car, circling slowly. "You seem nervous," he said. "Anyone would be," Lena replied carefully. He smiled faintly. "Don't be smart with me." She stayed quiet, hands by her sides. He stood in front of her again and said, "Put your hands on the hood." Her breath caught. "Officer, Now!" he barked. Lena placed her palms on the hood. The metal was hot from the sun. She could feel people looking. A couple walking by slowed down, whispering to each other. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't want to make things worse. The officer began patting her down roughly. It wasn't the first time she'd felt powerless like this, but it still made her chest tighten. She told herself to stay calm, to breathe, to get through it. When he finished, he took a step back. "Lift your skirt a bit," he said casually, like he was asking the time. Lena froze. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said. "Just to make sure you're not hiding anything." Her voice trembled slightly. "That's not necessary. You already checked my bag and my car." "Are you refusing a lawful order?" he said, his tone now louder, trying to show control. People nearby stopped pretending not to watch. Someone across the street pulled out their phone. The officer noticed but didn't stop. Lena swallowed hard. She looked him in the eye, her fear turning into quiet defiance. "I'm not hiding anything," she said firmly. He rolled his eyes. "Fine, don't make this difficult." He reached for the ID he'd tucked in his pocket earlier. He looked down at it again, maybe out of habit, and that's when it happened. His expression changed instantly. His face went pale and his mouth opened slightly. He stared at the last name printed on the ID card, his eyes flicking back to her face. Then he read it again, slower this time, as if he couldn't believe it. Lena watched his hands tremble slightly. "Something wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he adjusted his sunglasses and looked around as though checking who was watching. No problem," he muttered finally. You can relax. Just a routine stop," she frowned. "A routine stop?" "Yes, routine. You can get back in your car." His voice had lost all authority. It was softer now, nervous even. Lena didn't move. She could see confusion all over his face. "What changed?" she asked quietly. The officer stammered. "Nothing, just have a good day, miss." He tried to hand back her ID, but his grip faltered. She took it carefully, her eyes still fixed on him. "You were just about to search me in public. Why stop now?" He forced a weak smile. I don't think that'll be necessary anymore." Lena didn't respond. She could feel every eye on them. The man who had been recording whispered something to a friend. Still filming. The officer looked at the onlookers nervously, then leaned closer to Lena and said under his breath, "You should have told me who your father was." Her heart sank. So that's what it was. He'd recognized the name. "My father shouldn't matter," she said quietly. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The tension hung between them for a long moment before she turned and walked back to her car. Her hands shook slightly as she unlocked the door and sat down. When she glanced in the mirror, she saw the officer still standing there, frozen, trying to gather himself. His posture had changed completely, no longer confident, just uneasy and small. She drove away slowly, her heartbeat steadying as the courthouse came into view. Inside her chest, anger and relief mixed together. She knew exactly why his tone had changed. He knew her last name, and it scared him. As she pulled into the parking lot, she sat quietly for a moment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The encounter replayed in her mind again and again. She wasn't angry just for herself. She was angry for everyone who wouldn't have had that same protection, for those who didn't have a powerful name to stop the humiliation. Lena took a deep breath, straightened her skirt, and grabbed the folder from the seat beside her. The courthouse doors stood tall in front of her, and she walked toward them, trying to shake off the feeling that still clung to her skin. Inside, a security guard she recognized nodded politely. "Afternoon, miss," he said. She nodded back, forcing a small smile. "Afternoon." As she climbed the marble stairs, she saw her father at the far end of the hallway talking with another judge. He smiled when he saw her, waving her over. "You made it," he said warmly. "Did you run into traffic?" She hesitated. "Something like that." He studied her face for a second. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she said quietly. "Just a little delay." He nodded, accepting her answer for now. She handed him the folder and he thanked her, then turned back to his colleague. Lena stood there a moment, unsure whether to tell him. Part of her wanted to forget it. Another part knew she couldn't. She went down the hall, stopping near a bench by the window. She sat down, letting the sunlight warm her skin. Her phone buzzed in her bag, a message from a friend asking if she'd made it safely. She typed back, "Yes, but something happened." Then she paused, backspaced the words, and simply wrote, "All good." She didn't want to make it a story, not yet. But deep down she knew what had just happened wasn't something she could ignore. She replayed the officer's voice in her mind, the arrogance, then the panic. The way his whole body language had changed after reading her name. It wasn't respect. It was fear. Fear of power, not of conscience. That thought hurt more than anything else. She looked down at her ID still resting in her hand. Her name gleamed under the light, a name that carried weight in this city. She thought about how easily that weight could shift someone's behavior. For a few minutes she sat there quiet, just thinking. Then she put the ID away, straightened her back, and took another deep breath. She knew she couldn't stay silent about it forever. But for now she just needed to feel human again. Not a symbol, not a name, just herself. When she finally stood and walked back toward her father's office, the courthouse seemed to echo with calm. Yet behind her calm steps was a storm building, one that neither she nor the officer knew would soon reach far beyond that quiet street. After Lena walked into the courthouse, the memory of the traffic stop stayed with her. She could still feel the tension in the air, the way the officer had leaned in, the sharpness of his voice, and then the sudden panic when he saw her last name. Her chest tightened as she thought about the fear in his eyes, not for what he had done, but because he realized he had underestimated her. She moved slowly down the hall, trying to shake off the feeling, but it clung to her. People bustled around her, lawyers and clerks walking quickly with stacks of papers. She passed a few security officers who nodded politely, and she wondered what they would have done if they had been at the scene outside. She knew in that moment how easily people could be intimidated when someone in uniform decided they had power over them. Lena entered a small office where she usually delivered documents to her father. He looked up from a pile of files and smiled. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing the slight tension in her shoulders. "Yes, everything's fine." she said, forcing herself to sound normal. He studied her for a second, and then turned back to his papers. Lena handed him the folder and watched him carefully. She knew he was busy, but she also knew he would understand if she told him what had happened. "You know," she said quietly, "something strange happened on the way here." He raised an eyebrow, folding his hands on the desk. "Strange?" "Yes, at a traffic stop," she began. She described the way the officer had pulled her over, the way he had spoken to her, and finally how he had demanded she lift her skirt. Her voice didn't shake, but it carried the weight of the embarrassment she had felt. She didn't leave out any detail. Her father listened in silence. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but serious. "Did he see your ID?" "Yes," Lena replied. And then he froze. He looked like he couldn't breathe. "He kept reading my last name over and over." Her father nodded slowly. "I see, that explains everything. You mean he recognized it?" Lena asked, surprised. "Yes," he said. "He knows my name and he knows my record. He's probably realized he made a mistake, but his panic doesn't excuse what he did. This kind of behavior happens far too often." Lena felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because she had stayed calm and had not allowed the situation to get worse. Anger because she knew countless others didn't have a name to protect them. People without influence, people who had no one watching, faced this fear every day. Her father's voice softened. "You handled it well, but I want to make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. Do you still have your phone?" "Yes," she said, pulling it from her bag. The video recording she had captured played quietly in her mind. Every word, every motion of the officer, every subtle change in his posture was preserved. "Good," he said. "That recording is important. It proves the truth." Sometimes people in uniform forget they are accountable. They discussed what could be done next. Her father suggested submitting a formal complaint, but Lena hesitated. She didn't want to make it about revenge. She wanted to make it about accountability and justice, about making sure this kind of behavior couldn't continue unchecked. "Let's wait," her father said gently. "We'll gather evidence and then we'll decide the best way to proceed. But don't feel pressured to react immediately. You did nothing wrong." Lena nodded. His words comforted her, but the memory of the officer's panic continued to bother her. She could still see him standing on the curb, his confident posture gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. She wondered what went through his mind as he realized she was the daughter of someone who held him accountable. Outside the courthouse later that day, she walked to her car. The street was busy, but she felt a strange calm. The memory of the officer's fear had shifted something inside her. It wasn't enough to just experience this and move on. She wanted to ensure it didn't happen to someone else, someone who couldn't document it or turn to a name that mattered. She thought about how power could be used and misused. That officer had felt untouchable until he realized she was connected to someone in a position of authority. How many others faced similar situations without the ability to call someone who could intervene? How many had to silently endure the humiliation and fear? These questions swirled in her mind as she drove home. Later that evening, Lena shared the story with a close friend. She explained the stop, the demands, and the panic when her last name was revealed. Her friend was shocked. "I can't believe that happened to you," they said. "And you stayed so calm." "I had to," Lena replied. Getting angry wouldn't have helped. "I needed to stay in control," her friend nodded. "But what about reporting it?" "You have proof." "I know," Lena said. "I just need to think about the right way to handle it." I want it to matter, not just punish someone. People like that officer act without thinking about consequences because they know most people won't speak up. The next morning, Lena's thoughts were still with the incident. She reviewed the video on her phone, noticing things she hadn't seen in the moment. The way he avoided eye contact with passers-by, how his hands shook when he realized who she was. Each detail reminded her of the imbalance of power that existed too often. She decided to do some research on police accountability cases. She read stories of people who had faced racial profiling, harassment, and intimidation, many without any recourse. Lena felt a heavy weight of empathy for those who didn't have someone watching over them, someone who could ensure the truth mattered. By mid-morning, she called a friend who worked at a local community center that helped victims of police misconduct. She wanted advice on how to share the story safely and effectively, without exposing herself to retaliation. Her friend listened, then offered practical tips. "Keep it documented, keep it public if you can, but stay safe," they said. "Your experience can help others." Lena spent the afternoon drafting a careful note about the incident. She didn't exaggerate or sensationalize anything. She wrote exactly what had happened. From the moment she was pulled over to the officer's sudden panic, she made sure to describe the fear, the humiliation, and the subtle intimidation tactics. Her goal was clear: show the truth and make sure it could not be ignored. While she worked, her mind wandered back to the courthouse. She remembered the calm she had tried to feel, but also the underlying tension she had carried the entire time. That tension wasn't just hers. It was the tension of every person who had ever faced an authority figure without protection, every person who had to stay silent for fear of reprisal. By evening, Lena decided to call her father and update him. She told him about her plan to keep the video and notes for a formal submission later. He agreed and reminded her again to focus on the truth, not emotion. "Facts matter more than anger," he said. "And your facts are strong." That night, Lena reflected quietly on the incident. She felt a strange mix of power and frustration. She had power because she could document, share, and ensure accountability. She felt frustration because she knew the power imbalance was still real for so many others. She thought about the officer too, about the fear that had crossed his face when he realized who she was. It was a small victory, yes, but it was also a reminder that fear alone wasn't enough to change behavior. True change required awareness, training, and accountability. The next morning, Lena returned to her routine. She went to the courthouse, delivered documents, and watched her father at work. He didn't ask more questions, but his quiet presence reminded her that someone had her back. Still, she knew the larger issue remained. There were countless officers, countless encounters where people had no safety net. She had a voice, and she intended to use it carefully. Over the next few days, Lena focused on organizing the information she had. She labeled video files, wrote clear notes, and documented times and locations. Each detail strengthened her position and reminded her why staying calm had been essential. She thought about what could happen if she allowed anger to take over. The officer would have had the opportunity to twist the story, and the truth could have been lost. Her father also offered guidance, helping her understand how to navigate official channels. "Don't underestimate the power of procedure," he said. "Sometimes the system works if you give it a chance, but you have to present it properly." Lena began to see a path forward. She could share her experience, hold the officer accountable, and educate others about their rights. She could turn a frightening moment into something meaningful, and though the memory of the stop would never fully leave her, she felt ready to move forward with clarity, focus, and courage. By the end of the week, Lena had prepared her materials and thought carefully about her next steps. She felt stronger, more determined, and aware of the responsibility that came with having a voice that others might not. The encounter with the officer had shaken her, yes, but it had also awakened something, a desire to ensure that fear, intimidation, or prejudice could not go unchecked, at least in her own experience and hopefully in the experiences of others too. As she lay in bed that night, she reflected on the moment when the officer had panicked. That fear, she realized, was a glimpse of what accountability could look like. But fear alone would not fix the problem. Only truth, courage, and persistent action could, and Lena was determined to see that truth come to light. After a few days, Lena began to notice the subtle changes around her. The memory of the officer's panic stayed with her. But now it wasn't just about fear. It was about the opportunity to turn a small moment into something meaningful. She spent mornings at the courthouse, afternoons reviewing the recording, and evenings talking quietly with her father about the proper ways to handle it. Each step made her feel more in control, more prepared to act thoughtfully rather than react out of emotion. She realized that the moment she had captured on video was powerful. It showed everything: the officer's arrogance, his unjust demands, and most importantly, his panic when he saw her last name. Lena knew that people would see exactly what had happened and understand that she hadn't exaggerated or misrepresented anything. The video was honest, precise, and undeniable. Her father, always careful and measured, reminded her to be strategic. "We don't want this to be just a story about one officer," he said. "We want it to show that accountability matters. It's about making sure the system works, not about humiliation for its own sake." Lena nodded. He was right. Her goal wasn't revenge. It was justice and awareness. The thought of other people who faced similar stops every day without protection weighed heavily on her. She thought of friends, strangers, and countless others who had no way to defend themselves when confronted by someone in power. The officer's sudden fear had only come because of her name. It shouldn't take a name to command respect. Over the next few days, Lena focused on organizing her evidence carefully. She labeled every video clip, wrote detailed notes, and cross-checked times and locations. Her phone was full of recordings, and she made backups to ensure nothing could be lost. Each time she reviewed the footage, she noticed details she hadn't seen before. The way his hands trembled, the brief glances around as if checking for witnesses, the way his voice cracked when he tried to regain authority. Every observation reminded her how real the imbalance of power was, and how easily fear could expose truth. Lena decided to share the story, but she wanted to do it safely. She reached out to a community center that helped people who had experienced harassment or misconduct by law enforcement. She spoke with someone who listened attentively, providing advice on the best way to document and report the incident without putting herself at risk. "Your experience can help others," they said. "It's not just about you. The truth has the power to create change if it's handled carefully." Feeling more confident, Lena began drafting a statement. She didn't want to exaggerate or dramatize anything. She wanted the story to be clear, simple, and factual. She described the stop, the officer's orders, his arrogance, and his panic. She made sure to include the context, the way the officer demanded she lift her skirt and how he froze when he saw her last name. Lena read through it several times, each revision making the story more precise and measured. Meanwhile, the community center encouraged her to make a copy of the video available in a secure manner. Lena was nervous but agreed. She knew the video's impact could be significant. It could show the world exactly what happened, and it could spark conversations about accountability and respect for every individual, regardless of their background. One afternoon, as she walked to her car after delivering documents at the courthouse, Lena noticed people looking at her differently. Some seemed curious, others respectful. She realized that her composure during the stop had made an impression. Even in fear, she had maintained her dignity. This realization gave her strength. She understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. That evening, she shared a careful summary of the event with her father. He listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. "You've handled this well," he said. "But remember, the goal is larger than one officer."
Make sure your actions highlight the need for fairness and accountability, not just the mistake of an individual. Lena agreed.
She wanted this story to have meaning beyond herself. She wanted people to learn that respect was not optional, and fear alone was not enough to enforce it. She thought about the officer again, wondering how he felt knowing that his panic had been captured and could be seen by anyone with access to the video. She didn't wish him harm, but she hoped he would learn something from it. Over the next few days, Lena began reaching out to others who had faced similar incidents. She spoke with a few friends who had experienced harassment, intimidation, or profiling by law enforcement. Each story was different, but they shared a common thread: a sense of helplessness, a lack of accountability, and fear of retaliation. Lena listened carefully, empathizing deeply, and offered advice on documenting their experiences safely. One evening, she reviewed the video again. She noticed the moment he realized who she was. His confidence had evaporated instantly, replaced by panic and disbelief. That moment was the turning point. She realized it wasn't just about her name. It was a reminder that actions have consequences, and that no one is above accountability. The story began to take shape in her mind. She didn't want it to be about anger or revenge. She wanted it to show courage, composure, and the importance of truth. She thought about how many people had been stopped unjustly, and how few had the ability to expose it. Her own experience had given her a voice, and she felt a responsibility to use it. Her father noticed the change in her. "You're thinking bigger now," he said one afternoon. "That's good. The world needs people who can turn difficult experiences into lessons for others." Lena nodded. She felt a mixture of determination and caution. She knew that sharing her story publicly could be risky. People might misinterpret it, or the officer's colleagues could try to discredit her. But she also knew that the truth had power, and fear had no place in the face of it. With careful steps, Lena began preparing to share the video securely. She consulted with the community center and her father on the best way to do it. They discussed timing, messaging, and the importance of keeping the focus on accountability rather than personal attack. Lena realized that this was about more than one officer. It was about highlighting the need for change in the system. The day she decided to make the video available to a limited audience, Lena felt a mixture of nerves and relief. She chose a secure platform, sent it to a few trusted contacts, and waited. The response was immediate. People were shocked, not just by what happened, but by the stark contrast between the officer's arrogance and his sudden panic. Comments came in praising her composure, and people expressed how important it was to hold authority figures accountable. Lena read each message quietly, feeling a sense of connection. These were people who understood fear, injustice, and the need for truth. She realized that her small act of courage was inspiring others, encouraging them to document their experiences and demand accountability. Even as the video circulated, Lena remained cautious. She didn't want to draw attention to herself unnecessarily, but she also understood the impact it could have. She thought about the officer and the choices he had made. Fear had revealed the truth, but Lena knew that lasting change would require more than fear. It required reflection, education, and accountability. Her father continued to guide her, reminding her that the story was bigger than one incident. "You've done something important," he said. "But remember, it's about making sure others know they have rights and that the system can work if we do it right." Lena thought about all the people who didn't have a name to protect them, who faced similar stops and intimidation every day. She thought about how important it was to make her story not just about herself, but about the larger issue. She wanted it to be a lesson in courage, dignity, and the importance of truth. As the days went by, Lena continued to receive messages of support. People shared their own experiences, expressed gratitude, and asked for advice on how to document encounters safely. Lena responded carefully, offering guidance and encouragement. She realized that her small act of bravery had grown into something larger. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was a reminder that standing up for oneself, documenting the truth, and seeking accountability mattered. She also noticed subtle changes in her daily routine. People seemed more aware, more respectful, even those who didn't know the story. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her composure and courage had left an impression. It wasn't about recognition. It was about showing that dignity could prevail even in the face of fear and intimidation. One evening, Lena sat quietly at her desk, reviewing the video once more. She noticed every detail: the officer's shifting stance, his trembling hands, his nervous glances around the street. Each detail reminded her of the imbalance of power that existed too often. She thought about the countless people who had no way to document their experiences, no voice to be heard. That thought strengthened her resolve to use her own voice carefully, thoughtfully, and effectively. By the end of the week, Lena felt a sense of purpose. She had documented everything, shared it with trusted contacts, and received guidance on next steps. She knew the story was far from over. There would be investigations, discussions, and perhaps consequences for the officer. But more importantly, she had taken the first step toward turning a frightening moment into a lesson for herself and for others. As she lay in bed that night, Lena reflected on everything that had happened. The day after the video began circulating through trusted channels, Lena noticed subtle changes around her. She had expected some curiosity, maybe a few raised eyebrows, but the reaction was stronger than she imagined. People she knew in the courthouse whispered quietly, and even strangers who noticed her glanced with something closer to respect than curiosity. Her father, always calm and measured, reminded her that this was just the beginning. "You've done well documenting everything," he said that morning over coffee, "but now we have to let the process take its course. The video, the notes, everything, they will speak for themselves." Lena nodded, though she felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. She knew the officer's actions had been inappropriate, but seeing the fear on his face when he realized who she was had been only a small part of the story. What mattered now was accountability, not the fleeting moment of his panic. Later that morning, Lena received a call from the community center she had contacted earlier. A staff member spoke with urgency. "Lena, the video has begun reaching a wider audience. We need to prepare for questions, media attention, and possibly the department's internal review. Are you ready?" She took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready. But I want to make sure this is about accountability, not anger." "That's why you documented it so carefully," the staff member said. "Stick to the facts and you'll be heard clearly." By midday, word of the incident had reached the police department. Lena could sense the tension even from a distance. Reports were being filed, calls were being made, and officers were whispering in small groups. She knew the officer would soon be summoned for questioning. This wasn't just a personal matter anymore. It had grown into something larger, a public display of accountability that could not be ignored. When she returned to the courthouse, she saw the usual flow of people, but there was a noticeable difference. Some glanced at her with curiosity, while others whispered quietly. Lena felt a strange sense of calm. She realized that the courage she had shown during the traffic stop had not been forgotten, even in those brief, passing interactions. Her father called her into his office that afternoon. "The department has been notified," he said. "They've started an internal investigation. They'll be reviewing the video and your statement." Lena nodded. "I expected that. I just hope they take it seriously." "They will," he said. "They can't ignore evidence this clear. But remember, your role is to stay calm and stick to the truth. The officer's panic is not the focus, it's his actions, and your documentation shows them clearly." Later that week, Lena learned that the officer had been officially called in by Internal Affairs. He arrived at the department trying to carry the same confidence he usually displayed, but those who saw him noticed a subtle shift. His colleagues whispered, some shaking their heads, others avoiding eye contact. Even without knowing the full story, it was clear that something had gone wrong. Inside the Internal Affairs office, the officer faced questions about the traffic stop. They asked him about the orders he had given, the reasons for the search, and his behavior toward Lena. He tried to explain it as a routine stop, a minor procedure, but the body cam footage and Lena's video contradicted his account. Every motion, every command, every moment of panic was documented clearly, leaving him with little room for excuses. The interview lasted hours. The officer grew increasingly nervous as Internal Affairs presented the evidence. He tried to justify his actions as part of standard procedure, but the video showed otherwise. He faltered when asked about demanding Lena lift her skirt, and his attempts to explain it as a routine check sounded hollow even to him. Meanwhile, Lena kept her daily routine but remained aware of the investigation's progress. She went to the courthouse, delivered documents, and met with colleagues quietly. Each interaction reminded her of the importance of composure and calm. Her presence in the courthouse, her dignity under scrutiny, had left an impression on those who saw her. She realized that courage and calmness could have a quiet but powerful effect. As the internal review continued, the officer's past actions began to surface. Complaints that had previously been dismissed or overlooked were revisited. Other officers remembered minor incidents, but now, combined with the video evidence, they formed a pattern of behavior that could no longer be ignored. The officer's colleagues began whispering about what might happen, realizing that the consequences were real this time. The community center and Lena's father encouraged her to focus on her own life while the investigation proceeded. "You've done what you can," her father said. "The system is now in motion. It may take time, but it will work if you stay grounded and truthful." Despite the tension, Lena felt a growing sense of responsibility. She had documented everything carefully, followed the right procedures, and stayed calm under pressure. She realized that her actions could help set an example for others. People who lacked a voice could learn from her approach. Stay calm, document carefully, and ensure that truth is preserved. One afternoon, Lena met with a group of young women at the community center. They had heard about her experience and were eager to learn from her. She shared her story, focusing on the importance of composure, documentation, and staying safe. She didn't dwell on the officer's panic or humiliation, but instead emphasized how truth and preparation could empower people. The women listened attentively, some nodding, others taking notes. Lena realized that her experience had grown beyond herself. It was becoming a lesson in courage and accountability. Meanwhile, the officer awaited the outcome of the internal review. His confidence had been shaken. He had once believed that authority gave him unchecked power, but now he understood that actions have consequences, especially when documented. He spent long hours worrying about the investigation, reflecting on his decisions, and realizing how easily one moment could change everything. As the days passed, Lena continued her routine but felt a quiet anticipation. She knew the department would have to respond publicly at some point. The video and her statement had created a record that could not be ignored. Her goal was not revenge but accountability, and she hoped that the outcome would reflect that principle. Then came the day the department issued a statement. Lena read it carefully. They acknowledged the internal review, confirmed that an officer had been placed on administrative leave, and promised a thorough investigation. It was a small step, but it was an acknowledgement that her documentation mattered. The officer could not hide behind arrogance or fear anymore. The news reached the community and discussions began in local forums and social media. People debated the behavior, shared similar experiences, and praised Lena's calm composure. She remained quiet publicly, letting the evidence speak for itself. She didn't seek attention, but she understood the power of truth. Her father was proud but reminded her to stay grounded. "This is about accountability, not recognition," he said. "Your role is to ensure the truth is preserved and shared responsibly. That's the lasting impact you can make." Lena felt a sense of purpose. She had faced fear, intimidation, and humiliation, but she had preserved her dignity and documented the truth. Now the process of accountability was unfolding, and she could see that her actions were making a difference. The officer, meanwhile, was facing the reality of his career. Internal Affairs completed their review and submitted a report with clear evidence of misconduct. His colleagues and superiors acknowledged the severity of the actions, and he was formally suspended pending further disciplinary action. The initial panic he had felt when seeing Lena's name was now replaced with a deeper understanding that accountability had real consequences. As Lena continued her daily routine, she felt a mix of relief and determination. Relief because the system had begun to respond to her documentation, and determination because she understood that this was just one small step in a larger struggle for fairness and respect. She thought about the countless people who did not have the protection of a well-known name, who could not rely on public attention or documentation to protect them. Her experience had given her a voice, and she knew that voice could help others learn how to protect themselves. One evening, Lena met again with the group at the community center. She spoke quietly but firmly, explaining how to stay safe during encounters with authority, how to document actions carefully, and how to remain composed under pressure. The group listened closely, and Lena felt a growing sense of purpose. She realized that her experience had created an opportunity to empower others, not just herself. Her father watched her work and reminded her that courage combined with strategy could create lasting change. Lena felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had acted thoughtfully, calmly, and effectively. She had turned a frightening encounter into a lesson in truth and accountability. By the end of the week, Lena's preparation and careful documentation had begun to influence the conversation in the city. The officer's suspension, the public discussion, and the lessons she shared at the community center were starting to make people reconsider how authority should be exercised and how accountability could be ensured. Lena felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. She had faced fear directly, documented the truth, and ensured that the system could not ignore her experience. But she also understood that this was